Victoria's manicured nails dig into the sleeve of my white coat, the fabric straining at the seams. Her grip is surprisingly strong, a desperate anchor in the sterile sea of the hospital corridor. Please, Sarah, you have to help me. I know you haven't taken a pediatric case in years, not since, well, they said you were the best. They said you're the only one who can even attempt this surgery. You're the only pediatric surgeon who can save Emma. Please, just listen. I flinch, not from the pressure of her fingers, but from the sound of my own name on her lips. It feels alien, a name from another life she has no right to speak. I want to pull away, to tell her to find someone else, anyone else, but I remain frozen, a statue in a storm of her grief. The antiseptic air, a sharp chemical scent I've long grown accustomed to, suddenly burns my nostrils. It's her perfume that does it, Chanel No. 5, the same cloying, expensive scent she wore a decade ago when she sat behind a mahogany desk, a fortress of bureaucracy between me and my dying child. The smell makes my stomach lurch, a visceral memory clawing its way up my throat. 10 years have passed, yet that scent transports me back in an instant to a cramped administrative office and the hollow echo of a denied appeal. Back then, her nails were just as immaculate, tapping impatiently on a stack of papers that held my daughter's life within their cold, official margins. I'm listening, Victoria, I managed to say. My voice is sterile as the surrounding walls. A tremor starts in my hands, a faint vibration of resurfacing trauma. I instinctively curl them into fists, hiding them in the pockets of my coat. Muscle memory is a cruel ghost. It doesn't just remember the delicate dance of a scalpel or the precise art of a suture. It remembers the weight of a small, cooling hand in mine. It remembers the rhythmic, failing beep of a heart monitor in this very ICU, the final, ragged breath my own daughter took while I stood by, helpless. Victoria's desperation is a mirror reflecting my own past agony. "My little girl, she's only 5," she sobs, her voice cracking. "There's a tumor, a neuroblastoma, wrapped around her adrenal gland. It's aggressive. It's already stage 4. The doctors here are good, but they're not you. They said the position of the tumor, the way it's entangled with the arteries. They said it's a 1 in a million case, and you were the 1 in a million who could handle it. I'll pay anything. We have the best insurance, but I'll pay cash on top of it, whatever it takes. I just need you to say yes." "What did Dr. Chen say about the prognosis?" My question cuts through her pleading, sharp and clinical. Victoria blinks, startled by my tone. "He said it's not good at all. He said it's growing at an astronomical rate. He gave her less than a day. He said we have 18 hours before the tumor becomes completely inoperable. After that, it'll start crushing her organs from the inside." 18 hours, Sarah. Can you imagine that? Having a literal clock placed on your child's life? It's barbaric. It feels like a death sentence handed down by a clerk. Oh, the irony is a poison I could drown in. 18 hours, a lifetime. It's the exact window of opportunity, the precise stretch of hope my Sophie never got. Her fate was sealed not by a tumor, but by a signature Victoria withheld. I don't have to imagine. My words hang in the air between us, cold and heavy. Victoria's face, etched with fear and confusion, searches mine for some sign of empathy, some flicker of shared humanity. She finds none. The ghost of an old, buried rage begins to stir inside me, hot and familiar. She holds no memory of me. To her, I am not the woman whose world she shattered, not the grieving mother who begged and pleaded for a chance. I am merely a tool, a highly skilled pair of hands she needs to fix her own broken world. "What? I I don't understand," she stammers, pulling her hand back from my coat. "Look, I'm sorry. I'm falling apart. I haven't slept in 2 days. Just tell me you'll look at her chart. Tell me you'll consider it. She's just a little girl. She loves drawing butterflies. She has her whole life ahead of her. She doesn't deserve this." My own daughter loved drawing butterflies too. And she didn't deserve it either, but this woman, the architect of my pain, doesn't remember a single damning detail. And in her ignorance lies my power. I pluck Emma's chart from the nurse's station counter, the plastic binder cool and heavy in my hand. Victoria's hopeful gaze follows my every move. Inside, the pages are a clinical biography of a disaster, lab results with terrifying numbers flagged in red, pathology reports filled with words like malignant and undifferentiated, and high-resolution images of the monstrous growth coiled inside her small body. I flip through them methodically, my expression unreadable, letting the silence stretch until it becomes a tangible presence in the hallway. Victoria shifts her weight from one foot to the other, her manicured fingers twisting the strap of her leather handbag. She opens her mouth to speak, but I hold up a single finger, silencing her before a sound can escape. Then, with deliberate slowness, I pull out my phone. My thumb hovers over the contact for my surgical resident, the man scheduled to assist me in a routine gallbladder removal in less than an hour. I press the call button, and as it rings, I meet Victoria's wide, questioning eyes. The power has begun to shift. It is no longer locked behind a mahogany desk. It is right here, in the palm of my hand. "Are you canceling them?" she whispers, her voice tight with a fragile, burgeoning hope. "Your other surgeries? Does that mean you'll take her case? Does that mean you'll help her?" I end the call without speaking and cancel the procedure via text. "It means I'm making time to review the details," I say, snapping the chart shut. "I'll need to review everything first, Victoria. Every scan, every report, every prior consultation. Some cases require special consideration." My voice is flat, devoid of the warmth and reassurance she so desperately craves. Panic flashes across her face, overriding the brief flicker of hope. "Special consideration," she repeats, her voice rising in pitch. "What do you mean special? She's dying." "Dr. Chen gave us a deadline. There is no time for special consideration. You have her chart right there. What more do you need to review? It's all there in black and white." She gestures wildly at the binder in my hand, as if it's a simple instruction manual I'm refusing to read. "A chart is data. I need context," I reply calmly, starting to walk down the corridor, away from the ICU. "Walk me through it, from the beginning." Her mouth falls open. "The beginning? For God's sake, the beginning was weeks ago. It was a stomach ache. We thought she had the flu." I continue walking, forcing her to scramble to keep up. "And then?" I ask, my tone unchanging. "And then it didn't go away," she says, her voice trembling with frustration. "We took her to our pediatrician. They did an ultrasound to be safe, and they found it. A mass. They sent us here. They did MRIs, Connecticut scans, a biopsy. A biopsy. They put my 5-year-old daughter under anesthesia to stick a needle in her. And now you want me to retell the story? Every minute we waste talking is a minute that thing inside her is growing." I stop and turn to face her fully. "Every minute you spend resisting my process is a minute I'm not preparing for a potential surgery. Your daughter's life is on the line. I'm sure you agree that warrants a thorough, unhurried approach. Rushing leads to catastrophic mistakes. I will not be rushed." Her face crumples. "But we are out of time, don't you understand? The time for being unhurried is gone. We have a window and it's closing. Why are you being like this? Is this about money? I told you, I will pay whatever you want. I will sign anything. Just get her into an OR." I let her words, so similar to my own from a decade ago, hang in the air. "This has nothing to do with money. The first consultation with the oncologist here. What was his assessment?" She struggles to follow my cognitive leap. I don't remember his name. He was kind. He said it was very serious. He explained the staging, the poor prognosis for neuroblastoma at this stage. He recommended this hospital and he recommended you. He said you were retired from peds, but that if anyone could give her a chance, it was you. He's the one who called Dr. Chen to get us admitted. Are we done now? Can you please just do something?" I stare at her for a long moment. "No, we're not." "For the love of God, why?" she cries out, attracting a glance from a passing nurse. "Because your desperation is not my primary concern," I say, my voice dropping lower. "The integrity of the procedure is. I will have every piece of information, and I will have it now from you. Or you can find someone else." The threat lands with the force of a physical blow. She visibly deflates, all the fight draining out of her. Defeated, she follows me in silence. I open her daughter's chart again, my eyes scanning past the grim medical data to a small, unassuming box on the admissions form. Insurance provider. There it is, printed in neat block letters. Blackwood and Associates Legal Group, Premium Executive Plan. A bitter laugh threatens to escape my lips. Of course. Marcus Blackwood's law firm, they would have the best. The kind of plan that doesn't just cover procedures, it commands them. The kind of top-tier, gold-plated coverage that includes experimental treatments, private recovery suites, and access to any specialist in the country without a second thought. It is the first and most savage of the day's many ironies. I can still feel the cheap, flimsy paper of my own insurance denial letter. I had a standard PPO plan, the best my community clinic job could offer. It was good, solid insurance, until it wasn't. I remember the words Victoria herself had quoted from the denial report, her voice professional and detached. The requested treatment is considered experimental and not a covered benefit under the patient's current plan. Experimental. My daughter's only chance was dismissed with the same bureaucratic indifference one might use to deny coverage for a cosmetic procedure. Victoria's premium plan was a safety net woven from gold, while mine was a threadbare cloth designed to tear the moment any real weight was put upon it. The hospital corridors begin to bustle with the 6 p.m. shift change. The outgoing nurses, weary and worn, pass the incoming shift, their hushed voices exchanging updates and vital information. The squeak of gurney wheels, the distant rhythmic beep of monitors, the overhead page for a doctor to call dialysis. It's the familiar symphony of organized chaos. It is a sound of urgency, a rhythm of life and death that I am now deliberately, cruelly ignoring. I slow my pace, my steps becoming measured, almost leisurely. Each footfall on the polished linoleum is a calculated beat, a second of the clock I am stealing from her. Beside me, I can feel Victoria's desperation vibrating like a tuning fork. Her breathing is shallow and quick. Her eyes dart from my face to the large clock on the wall and back again, the frantic movements of a trapped animal. She knows, on some primal level, that she has lost control of the situation, that the timetable is no longer dictated by the tumor in her daughter's body, but by the woman walking slowly, so very slowly, beside her. When I take a turn down a long, quiet hallway leading away from the main wards, she finally breaks. The archives? But the scans are in the file. They're digital. You can see them on any computer. Her voice is a strained plea. I don't even look at her. I want to see the originals with the radiologist's notations. I found a small, sticky table in the corner of the hospital cafeteria, a place that reeked of stale coffee and industrial cleaning agents. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead hummed a dissonant tune, casting long, warped shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of Victoria. I had sent her here with a dismissive wave, telling her I needed at least an hour to review the original imaging films without distraction. It was a lie, of course. The digital copies in her daughter's file were more than sufficient. My true purpose was to watch this, to watch her squirm. And she did not disappoint. She paced back and forth near the wilting salad bar, her $1,000 phone pressed to her ear, a lioness whose cage had suddenly shrunk. This was her counter move, the desperate flailing of a woman who was used to getting her way. Her network of powerful friends, the one she navigated with such casual entitlement, was being put to the test. I understand it's short notice, Richard, but this is an emergency, I heard her say, her voice strained. It's for Emma. Yes, my Emma. We need the best pediatric surgeon, and we need them now. No, there's a doctor here, a Sarah Martinez. She's considering it, but she's being difficult. I need a second option, someone who can move tonight. Money is no object. A cold smile touched my lips. She could call everyone in her gilded Rolodex. It wouldn't matter. They couldn't conjure a surgeon with my specific skill set out of thin air. Her power, once so absolute, was useless in this arena. She was learning what I had learned a decade ago. When it comes to the life of your child, there are doors that wealth and influence cannot unlock. Her husband arrived like a thunderclap. Marcus Blackwood was exactly as I remembered him. though perhaps with a few more distinguished silver strands at his temples. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car, and he moved with the aggressive, unapologetic confidence of a man who believed the world was his to command. He didn't see the cafeteria or the tired nurses on their break. He saw only his objective. He strode directly to his wife, grabbing her by the shoulders. "Victoria, what in God's name is going on? I got your frantic texts. Why isn't Emma in pre-op?" I called Chen on my way here, and he told me he handed the case off to his best surgeon hours ago. Victoria looked utterly defeated. "She won't do it, Marcus. She's dragging her feet, asking questions, going to look at old files. She's right over there." Marcus's sharp, assessing eyes fell on me. He dismissed me in a single glance, a mid-level doctor enjoying a coffee break while his world was ending. He left Victoria and marched toward my table, his expensive shoes clicking menacingly on the floor. "You're Dr. Martinez?" he demanded, not waiting for an answer. "I'm Marcus Blackwood, Emma's father. Whatever game you're playing is over. I've already spoken to the hospital board, and I'm about to have a very serious conversation with Dr. Chen about expediting this procedure. Now, what's it going to take to get you into that operating room?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee before answering. It was bitter, almost burnt. "Dr. Chen is in a 7-hour transplant surgery. He's unavailable," I said, my voice even. "And the board won't be able to help you. You can speak with me." Marcus scoffed, a humorless, arrogant sound. "I don't think you understand who I am. We have a ticking clock here, doctor. There are 18 hours on that clock, and you've already wasted nearly 3 of them. So let's cut the crap. What's your fee? Is that the problem? You want more money? Fine. Whatever your standard rate is for a procedure this complex, I'll double it. Wire transfer, tonight." He pulled out his phone as if to prove the point. I let the offer hang in the air, savoring his assumption that this, like everything else in his life, could be solved by his checkbook. "Money isn't the issue here, Mr. Blackwood," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Your wife's history with this hospital is—" The statement landed like a stone in a silent pool. Marcus's smug expression faltered, replaced by a deep, furrowed confusion. He shot a look at Victoria, who had drifted closer. "What history?" he asked, his voice losing its confident edge. "We live 2 hours from here. Victoria's never been treated here before." I held his gaze. "Not as a patient." His confusion deepened. "Then what are you talking about? A volunteer? A donor? What possible history could she have that would stop you from saving my daughter's life?" Victoria looked pale, her mind clearly racing, searching for an answer. I don't know what she means, Marcus," she stammered. "I've never worked here. Maybe I attended a fundraiser once?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping. "Are you sure? Think back, Victoria, about 10 years ago. A different wing of the hospital, the administrative wing. A very difficult insurance appeal. A little girl named Sophie. The name just hung there. Sophie. It meant everything to me. It meant nothing to them." I watched their faces, searching for any flicker of recognition, any hint of dawning horror. There was nothing. Marcus just looked more frustrated, as if I were a madwoman speaking in riddles. Victoria's face was a canvas of pure, uncomprehending fear. She couldn't connect the dots because for her there were no dots to connect. My daughter's case was just one of hundreds she had processed, a file to be stamped, a cost to be analyzed, a problem to be dismissed. Sophie was a statistic, a budget line item. The sheer, breathtaking callousness of her forgetting was more damning than the initial act itself. I took another long, slow sip of the cafeteria's awful coffee. The bitter liquid scorched the back of my throat, a perfect counterpoint to the sweet, intoxicating victory that was blooming in my chest. It was a dark, venomous flower, but it was mine. They were completely at my mercy, trapped in a nightmare of my design, and they didn't even know my name. The power was absolute. I drained the last of the coffee and placed the styrofoam cup on the table with a soft thud. I stood up, smoothing the front of my white coat. "Well," I said, looking at the clock on the wall, "time is wasting." I left them there, frozen in the harsh fluorescent glare, their perfect, powerful world beginning to fracture around them. I led them not to the imaging archives, but to the sterile silence of my personal office. The air was cool, the only light emanating from the dual monitors on my desk. They followed me in, their confusion radiating like heat in the small space. Marcus, stripped of his bluster, looked merely like a man in an expensive suit who had stumbled into the wrong room. Victoria was a ghost, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with a nameless dread. She knew, on some cellular level, that a verdict was about to be rendered. I didn't invite them to sit. I remained standing behind my desk, a judge before her bench, and clicked open a file on my laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying the grainy, time-stamped footage of a hospital security camera from 10 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, his voice a low growl. "We don't have time for home movies, doctor. Our daughter is dying." "I know," I said softly, never taking my eyes off the screen. "I know all about dying children." The video showed a waiting area outside a set of administrative offices. A younger version of me sat on a hard plastic chair, my face gaunt, my hands clenched in my lap. I looked broken. The office door opened and a woman emerged, younger, sharper, dressed in a severe navy blue suit. It was, undeniably, Victoria. I don't understand," Victoria whispered, her voice trembling as she stared at her own image. "What am I watching?" "You're watching the day you killed my daughter," I said, my voice as clear and cold as ice. The camera's microphone was surprisingly clear, capturing the audio from the hallway. On screen, the younger me stood up, pleading. "Please, Miss Vance," my past self begged, using Victoria's maiden name. "The board said you have discretionary authority. You can make an exception. The doctors say this is Sophie's only chance." The Victoria on the screen looked at her watch, her expression one of pure, unadulterated impatience. "I understand your position, Mrs. Martinez," the video Victoria said, her voice crisp and dismissive. "But policy is policy. The appeal has been reviewed, and the panel's decision is final. The requested treatment is not a covered benefit. The hospital cannot absorb that kind of cost." "I'm sorry." The video ended with Victoria striding away, leaving my younger self to collapse back into the chair, a silent scream contorting my face. I paused the video on a close-up of her, imperious, untouchable, utterly indifferent. "Vance," Victoria breathed, the name a forgotten relic. "That was my name before I married Marcus." I turned the laptop to face them fully. "Do you remember her now?" I asked, pointing to my own shattered image on the screen. "Do you remember Sophie?" The silence in the room was absolute, heavier than grief. It was the sound of a life crashing down, of a past refusing to stay buried. Victoria stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth as a low, guttural sob escaped her. Her legs gave way and she sagged against Marcus, who caught her automatically, his own face a mask of stunned disbelief. He looked from the screen to me, the pieces clicking into place with audible shattering force. "My God," he breathed. "Sophie Martinez, you're Sophie's mother." Victoria began to weep uncontrollably, shaking her head back and forth. "I don't remember," she cried, the words muffled by her hand. "I swear to you, I don't remember that specific case. There were so many, hundreds of them, budgets, policies. I was just doing my job. It was my job to protect the hospital's resources. I never meant for any child to suffer." Her excuses were a torrent of self-preservation, the same pathetic justifications I had imagined her making for a decade. I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. Only the cold, hard satisfaction of truth, finally delivered. "You weren't just doing your job, Victoria," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. "You were the head of hospital administration. You had the power to override the panel. I know because I read the bylaws, chapter and verse, while my daughter was dying in a room upstairs. It was your signature, and yours alone, that could have saved her. You didn't just follow policy. You chose it. You chose the budget over my child's life." Marcus looked at his wife, a new, horrifying understanding dawning in his eyes. Victoria, is this true? He asked, his voice strained. She couldn't answer, her sobs her only confession. I looked at the digital clock on my monitor. The numbers glowed, each tick a heartbeat. Emma's heartbeat. I looked back at them, the two people who had destroyed my world and then had the luxury of forgetting it ever happened. 24 hours from now, I said, letting the words sink into the poisoned air of the office. I'll be holding Emma's beating heart in my hands, just as you once held my daughter's fate in yours. You, Victoria, were her judge and her jury. And now, I am hers. Tell me, what would you do in my position? They had no answer. What could they possibly say? Victoria's sobs subsided into ragged, hitching breaths. Marcus stood frozen, holding his weeping wife, his face pale and slack with the horror of it all. The arrogant lawyer, the man who could command and threaten his way through any obstacle, was utterly and completely neutered. He had no argument, no counteroffer, no legal loophole to exploit. He was just a father, terrified for his child, standing before the woman his wife had condemned. The power I felt in that moment was dizzying, a terrible and sublime force. It was the culmination of 10 years of grief, 10 years of rage, 10 years of imagining a moment just like this. And it was more potent than I had ever dreamed. I had been invisible to them, a piece of paperwork, a weeping, hysterical mother to be managed and dismissed. Now, I was the only thing in the world they could see. I was the gatekeeper to their future, the arbiter of their happiness, the god in their machine. With a decisive, sharp click, I closed the laptop. The screen went dark, plunging the room into a deeper gloom and severing the connection to the past. The trial was over. I stood up straight, the weight of a decade seeming to lift from my shoulders. I was no longer the broken mother who begged at administrative desks. I was no longer the ghost haunting the halls of my own past. The grief was still there, a hard, cold stone in my soul, but it was no longer a weakness. It was a whetstone. It had sharpened me into this, into the woman standing before them now, a woman who held life and death in her hands and was not afraid to use that power. I walked to the door, my footsteps the only sound. I didn't look back at them. I didn't need to. I could feel their terrified eyes on my back. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "The pre-op nurse will be with you shortly to get you settled," I said, my voice reverting to perfect clinical detachment. "I need to go scrub in." The ritual of scrubbing in is a sacrament of control. I stood at the deep steel basin, the water running precisely at the temperature I preferred. For 7 minutes, I methodically worked the antiseptic soap over my hands and forearms from fingertips to elbow, following the precise, disciplined pattern I had learned 2 decades ago. Each stroke was a meditation, a deliberate act that scraped away the outside world, leaving only the focused mind of the surgeon. This was my armor, my sanctuary. When I was done, a nurse helped me into my sterile gown and gloves, tying the back with practiced efficiency. The mask settled over my face, muffling the world and amplifying the sound of my own steady breathing. I was no longer Sarah Martinez, the grieving mother. I was Dr. Martinez, an instrument of healing, a vessel of pure, dispassionate skill. I walked out of the prep room into the brightly lit surgical corridor. The OR team was assembled, a quiet hum of readiness. Through the wide porthole window on the operating room door, I could see the small, still form on the table, draped in blue sheets. Emma. But I didn't turn toward the door. Instead, I walked directly to the surgical nurses' station, where Marcus and Victoria stood waiting like prisoners awaiting their sentence. Their faces were hollowed out by hours of fear and the recent brutal revelations. I took the consent forms from the clipboard, the pages that held the power of life and death, and placed them deliberately on the counter between us. The signature line at the bottom of each page was starkly, conspicuously blank. Victoria flinched as if I had struck her. Marcus simply stared at the empty line, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped along his cheek. This was my second strike, delivered not with a scalpel but with a pen I refused to lift. A young scrub nurse, oblivious to the drama unfolding, bustled up to the counter. She glanced at the clock on the wall, then at the unsigned forms. "Dr. Martinez, we're ready for the patient," she said, her voice professionally cheerful. Anesthesia has her stable. We need those signatures now. The window is closing. I didn't acknowledge the nurse. My eyes were locked on Victoria. And I need to speak with the family about complications. The word dropped into the sterile air like a shard of glass. Marcus stepped forward, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. What complications? You've had her charts for hours. You've reviewed everything. You just said you were scrubbing in. You never once mentioned any complications. Victoria lunged toward the counter, her hands gripping the edge. What do you mean? She pleaded, her voice cracking. You said you could do this. When you took the chart, you implied you could do it. What's changed? Is it something you found in the scans? Is it worse than you thought? Her desperation was a raw, open wound, and I felt a grim satisfaction in pouring salt into it. I said I would review the case. I corrected her, my voice muffled and impersonal through the surgical mask. And I have. The scans are exactly as I expected. The tumor is aggressive, complex, and dangerously positioned. But I can remove it. A wave of relief washed over their faces, so profound it was almost painful to watch. Then what is it? Marcus pressed. What is the complication? I met Victoria's terrified gaze over the top of my mask. Nothing about this case is routine, Victoria. The complication, I began, my voice dropping so they had to lean in to hear me, isn't with Emma's tumor. The complication is with the timeline. I picked up the chart, but I didn't need to look at it. I had memorized every date, every detail, every cruel coincidence. I was trying to place it all 10 years ago while you were the head of administration, while you were sitting on the panel that reviewed my daughter's insurance appeal. I kept wondering how you could be so detached, so cold. I paused, letting the memory hang in the air. So I did some research this afternoon, in the hospital's own archives. It's amazing what they keep records of. I looked directly at Victoria, whose face had gone as white as the linoleum floor. You were approximately 6 months pregnant during those meetings, weren't you? Marcus looked at his wife, utter confusion on his face. Pregnant? What does that have to do with anything? But Victoria knew. Her eyes were wide with a dawning, soul-shattering horror. She understood where I was going. I pulled the birth announcements from that year, I continued, my voice relentless. Emma Blackwood, born October 12th. 3 months after Sophie Martinez died. Emma isn't just any patient, Victoria. She is the daughter you were carrying in your womb while you condemned mine. She's the baby whose future you were protecting with your budgets and your policies, while you sat across a desk from me and decided that my child wasn't worth the resources. That is the complication. You were choosing your child over mine before she was even born. The truth landed with the force of a physical detonation. Victoria made a choked, strangled sound and crumpled, sinking to the floor in a heap of inconsolable grief. Marcus stood paralyzed, his face a grotesque tableau of shock, fury, and dawning comprehension. He stared at me, then at his sobbing wife, then back at me. The neat, orderly world he commanded had been turned inside out, revealing a foundation of such profound and hideous irony that it defied reason. He had no words. There were no words. The universe had delivered a poetic justice so cruel and so perfect that it left no room for argument. I turned away from them and walked to the large window at the end of the corridor. Outside, the blackness of night was beginning to soften at the edges. A pale gray smear appeared on the horizon, the first hint of dawn. The city below was still a sea of glittering lights, but its slumber was ending. The shift was coming. The relentless march of time was something you couldn't appeal. The 18-hour deadline, which had seemed like a lifetime when Victoria first approached me, had bled away. It was now 12 hours. Then, as the sun's first true rays broke over the distant buildings, painting the sky in strokes of pale pink and orange, it became 8. With every passing minute, every new ray of light that pierced the hospital's sterile gloom, the window was shrinking. 8 hours became 6. 6 became 4, and still the consent form lay on the counter, a silent testament to a debt that had finally come due. The surgical amphitheater was a cold, cavernous space, a theater built for lessons in mortality. Below, in the stark white circle of the operating room, my team moved with quiet, practiced efficiency, laying out gleaming instruments and checking the monitors that would soon display Emma's life in a series of fragile, rhythmic lines. Above, behind a vast pane of angled glass, the tiered gallery seating was beginning to fill. I had requested their presence myself, extending an invitation to every surgical resident and fellow on duty. The official reason was educational, a rare and complex pediatric neuroblastoma resection, a unique learning opportunity. The residents filed in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and academic focus, notebooks ready. They were the jury. High above them all, in the back row, the gallery door opened and Victoria and Marcus entered. They looked like ghosts, their expensive clothes rumpled, their faces ravaged by a sleepless night of dawning horror. They saw the audience and a new wave of panic washed over Victoria's face. She had thought this would be a private transaction, a desperate bargain made in the quiet corridors of the night. She was wrong. I had dragged her guilt out of the shadows and placed it under the full glare of these operating lights. This was not just a surgery, it was a tribunal. I adjusted my surgical loops, the magnifying glasses that would allow me to see the microscopic landscape of life and death, and gave a nod to the anesthesiologist. He gave me a thumbs up in return. Emma was stable, the stage was set. I walked over to the wall-mounted microphone, flipping the switch that activated the intercom to the observation gallery. A soft hiss echoed through the OR, and I saw the residents in the gallery straighten in their seats, their attention now fully on me. Above, Victoria flinched, as if from a sudden shock. "Victoria," I said, my amplified voice calm and clear, cutting through the silence. "Can you hear me clearly?" Marcus stepped in front of her, a protective, futile gesture. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice thin and distant through the glass. "You have the forms. You said you would operate. Why are all these people here? This is a private matter." "On the contrary, Mr. Blackwood," I replied, my voice resonating throughout the entire theater. "This is a matter of public record. This is a teaching hospital. And this is a teachable moment. A lesson in medical ethics. A lesson in consequences." I looked past him, my gaze pinning Victoria where she stood. 10 years ago, you sat behind a mahogany desk in an office not half a mile from where we are now. You told me my daughter wasn't worth the hospital's resources. Do you remember that office, Victoria? Do you remember the pleas of the mother sitting in front of you? She shook her head, her hand flying to her mouth. "Please," she whispered, her voice inaudible to anyone but her husband. "Please, Sarah, don't do this." "You didn't remember her name, did you?" I pressed on, my voice echoing her deepest shame for all to hear. "Not until I forced you to. Not until I showed you the proof. But now you remember. Say her name, Victoria. Say my daughter's name for this entire room to hear." She squeezed her eyes shut. I can't." "Say it," I commanded, my voice like steel. "Sophie Martinez, age 4. She died in this very hospital, waiting for an approval you had the power to give but never did. An approval you denied while you were carrying your own healthy child." From the corner of my eye, I saw the residents exchanging shocked, disbelieving glances. The pretense of a routine surgical observation was gone. They were witnessing something far more raw. "It was just policy," she finally choked out, the pathetic, threadbare excuse she had clung to. "I was doing my job." "Was it your job to pass a death sentence?" I countered. "Was it your job to decide one child's life was worth less than another's?" "Tell them, Victoria. Tell these future doctors the truth about the power you held." She was weeping openly now, her body shaking with violent, silent sobs. Marcus held her, but his eyes were on me, filled with a mixture of hatred and utter helplessness. I turned away from the microphone and picked up the clipboard from the instrument tray. The consent form was still there, pristine and unsigned. I walked across the operating room floor until I stood directly beneath the observation gallery, my back to the operating table. Then, I turned and faced them, raising the clipboard until it was pressed flat against the cool, thick glass of the partition that separated our two worlds. I held it there, my gloved finger pointing to the empty line. In my other hand, I held a pen. "This is the choice you once had, Victoria," I said, my voice returning to a conversational, almost gentle tone, a stark contrast to my previous interrogation. The proximity to the glass meant they could hear me without the intercom. A piece of paper, a signature. It's all it would have taken. The only difference is I remember the face of the child. I know her name is Emma. I know she loves the color purple and drawing butterflies, just like my Sophie did. My own words caught in my throat for a second, a flare of genuine pain amidst the calculated revenge. 10 years of grief, I continued, my voice steadying. 10 years of sleepless nights of imagining your face, of wondering if you ever thought about me or what you had done. It all crystallizes right here in this single moment. This pen, this line, the absolute intoxicating power to choose, to give life or to let it be extinguished by inaction. It's a terrible burden, isn't it? Tell me, Victoria, what is the policy in a situation like this? What should I do? She pushed away from Marcus and stumbled toward the glass, her palms pressing flat against the pane, as if she could somehow reach through and grab the pen from my hand. Please, she begged, her voice now a desperate, raw cry that was clearly audible through the glass. I'm begging you, save her, forgive me, I was wrong, I was so wrong, I admit it, I'll do anything. I stepped back to the intercom, my finger pressing the button. The entire amphitheater was wrapped, caught in a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. You admit it? I asked, my voice once again booming through the speakers, public and unforgiving. What is it that you admit, Victoria? Tell me. Tell them. Say it so everyone can hear. What did you do? She knew this was the final price. The pound of flesh I was demanding. Her confession, public and undeniable, broadcast to a room full of her husband's future colleagues and her daughter's potential saviors. Her reputation, her career, her carefully constructed life, all of it was secondary to the life of her child. She had finally arrived at the same choice she had forced on me. She looked out at the gallery of stunned faces, then down at me, the anonymous figure in surgical green holding all the power. Her shoulders slumped in ultimate defeat. Her voice, when it came, was broken, but it was clear and the microphone picked up every agonizing word. She began, her confession echoing through the theater. I let a child die. Sophie Martinez. I remember her now. I remember her mother. I denied her the treatment that could have saved her life. I had the power to approve it, and I didn't. I hid behind policy, and I let her die. The words hung in the air, an invisible, indelible stain. The truth, finally spoken, finally witnessed. She had finally truly acknowledged the child she let die, and in doing so, had handed me the only thing I ever truly wanted. Her soul. Victoria's confession hung in the air of the amphitheater, a specter of sound that silenced every rustle, every cough, every breath. The residents in the gallery were no longer students. They were witnesses, their faces pale with the raw, vicarious shock of a truth they were never meant to hear. Behind the glass, Victoria was a heap on the floor, Marcus standing over her, not in comfort, but as a guard over a ruin. I looked at her broken form, then at the consent form in my hand, the pen held ready. 10 years of rage had led me to this precipice, to this exquisite moment of absolute power. I had the power to make her feel the exact soul-crushing helplessness she had inflicted on me. I could let the clock run out. I could walk away and let fate, in its most brutal form, balance the scales. But as I looked at the pen, I didn't see a weapon. I saw the tool of my trade, the instrument of my oath. My entire life since Sophie's death had been a pilgrimage toward this moment, but my revenge was never about becoming a monster to punish another. It was about forcing a monster to see her own reflection. My revenge was in her confession, not in her daughter's death. To let Emma die would be to repeat Victoria's cruelty, to become her, to validate her cold calculus that some lives are worth more than others. I became a doctor to heal. It was the only way I knew how to piece my own shattered soul back together. With a steady hand, I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper and signed my name. The signature was clear and decisive. I placed the clipboard on the instrument tray, turned to my waiting team, and gave a single sharp nod. Let's begin. The 6 months that followed were a quiet avalanche, the consequences of that day cascading through their lives in slow, grinding motion. The recording of the surgical lesson, including Victoria's full, sobbing confession, was leaked from the hospital's educational archives by an anonymous source. It spread like a virus through the city's medical and legal communities. Victoria resigned from her new high-paying consultancy position before she could be fired. The public disgrace was absolute. Marcus filed for divorce within weeks. During the custody hearings, which were mercilessly covered by the local press, other stories began to surface. Two other families came forward detailing how Victoria's callous, budget-first decisions had resulted in denied care and catastrophic outcomes. Her history, once a source of professional pride, was revealed to be a pattern of cruelty. She lost primary custody. The last I heard, she was working part-time as an intake coordinator at a free community clinic on the other side of the state, finally forced to confront the desperate, terrified faces of a system she had once so callously manipulated. She was now the one who had to look people in the eye and tell them what resources were and were not available. There was no victory for me in this knowledge, only a quiet, somber sense of an ending. The real epilogue arrived in my office mail slot once a month. They were crayon drawings on cheap construction paper, sent in a plain white envelope. The first one was a lopsided purple butterfly with bright orange wings. Then a yellow one. Then a whole family of them. Emma's drawings. They were a fragile, innocent bridge between my past and my present. A sign that the cycle of pain had been broken and replaced with a chance for life. I have one of Emma's drawings, a brilliant blue butterfly with lopsided wings, taped to the wall above my desk. Beside it is another drawing, faded with age, done by a smaller, clumsier hand. It's a pink butterfly my Sophie drew for me a week before she died. For a long time, looking at Sophie's drawing was like staring into a black hole. It was a portal to a pain so immense it threatened to consume me. Now it's different. The grief has not vanished, it never will. It is a part of my cellular makeup, the phantom limb of a mother who has lost her child. But it is no longer a void. Next to it is this new drawing, a testament to a life that continues, a life I chose to save. It doesn't fill the hole Sophie left, but it lets a little light in. It reminds me that even after the cruelest winter, a butterfly can still emerge. A life can still begin again. The rage has quieted, replaced by a profound, bittersweet stillness. I look at the calendar on my desk, the date circled in red, not out of celebration, but out of solemn memory. Sophie would have turned 15 today. But because of the choice I made, Emma gets to turn 6.